Okay, today I'm going to make beef teriyaki stir fry. So I've got tri-tip sirloin in here, chopped onions, sweet pedalias, these little sweet cherry peppers that I use quite a bit, as you can see. I also shredded in about 1 teaspoon of raw ginger. I shredded it. Now we're going to use a little salt to start with, ground pepper, and a little Tony Saturates. Next we want to use teriyaki stir fry sauce. You can use whichever one you want. I just happen to have this available. That's probably enough. It was probably about, probably about 2 tablespoons full. Well, we're going to use the soy sauce later. And I've made some rice, white rice to go with this. This is a royal rice. I have the raw shrimp, shelled jumbo shrimp. That'll go in later, along with the vegetables. I have rainbow carrots. Some are orange, some are like this. Cabbage, red pepper, and of course more sweet Vidalia onions. We'll put those in towards the end. And then at the very end, we'll put the mushrooms and the broccoli in at the last, because you don't want this to be overcooked. You just want this to be greened up, and the same with this. And these will actually go in the broth that we'll create. Now we're going to use some more crushed pepper. I didn't grab a regular pepper out of the indoor greenhouse, but I'm going to dehydrate most of those cayenne peppers. Then we're going to use some garlic salt. I usually use raw garlic, but I forgot to pick some up at the store yesterday. I'm going to use a little bit of powder, garlic powder. And we're going to turn this on to a medium heat, just between low and medium, and slow cook this. One other thing we're going to add in, some brown sugar, because we want it sweet, spicy, tasty. So we're going to put in about, I'd say that's probably about 1/4 cup, 1/2 cup, depending on the size of the meat you have. This is I believe this is 2 pounds of steak. Another item that we'll be using later for the broth is chicken broth once we cook the meat down. So I'm going to cook this down and brown up the meat first, and then we'll go ahead and make sure you mix it good so that you get the teriyaki in there. That's all over it in the brown sugar. I'm using a stainless steel wok, and you can see these are pretty good sized cuts of meat. So it's going to take a little while to cook down. Now, towards the end, we'll also add in our sesame seed oil and more teriyaki sauce towards the end. And then we'll broth it up. We'll use about a tablespoon with water of cornstarch to thicken up the broth after we add the chicken broth in. So I'm going to cook this and I'll be back. Okay, we're getting down to the point where it's cooked down, tender, and I'm going to give a little test here. Now if I can do that, cut that piece in half easily, and it's ready. Still a little bit tough, so here's what we do. because nobody likes their meat too tough to beat. At least I don't. Here's what we do. We're not done cooking it down yet to make it nice and tender, so we're going to go ahead and add about a cup of chicken broth, and we're going to cook it some more. Nobody likes tough meat. Okay, so this part goes pretty rapidly now. You'll notice that most of the onions, you can't even see them. That's when you know the meat's tender. And you can just slice it like that. So here's what we're going to do. It's coming. Alright, we're going to add in these vegetables. Peppers, cabbage, and everything else. And now what we're going to do is we're going to add more chicken broth. We're going to steam these for about 5 minutes. Add about a cup and a half, 2 cups, depending on the size of your mixture. And there's another thing to do too, by the way. Get it in there and mix it up so you get the flavor on everything. Okay, one thing we're going to do though, right now, you see this? This gives that little tang to your food, so you want to start putting, in this case, if you're making a small portion, you put 1 in or 2, but we're making a bigger batch, so we're going to go ahead and put about a tablespoon of apple cider in there, and that will give it that little bite tangy part of it in your sauce when it's all done. That's really delicious. Another thing we want to do now, besides mixing this all together, this is the time where the soy sauce goes into the mix. Yeah, about a tablespoon. Now you're probably wondering why you use chicken broth and not beef broth for this. Because beef broth has a lot of other stuff added into it, and it'll give you more of that, well, how can we say it, undesirable taste. We want to taste the meat, not the broth. And you'll find that a lot of Chinese food and a lot of Mexican food, Hispanic food, actually has chicken broth in it instead of beef broth. Just a natural thing that they do for cooking. Now, one thing I want to add in right now is this. These are maple glazed pecan pieces and dates and apples, and that just gives it a little bit of a fruity taste to your meat and everything else. You don't have to add this in. I don't always add this in, but I like to put some type of nut or something in there. So this will give it that taste. We'll just mix that in there. So it's going to be sweet, spicy teriyaki, and it'll have some heat on it. Now you use the amount of heat that you want on your food, but in my case we like the hot food, so that's why we go ahead and use a lot of it. Now this is the part where you actually crank the heat up to medium, because we really want to steam this so that we blanch. In respects to that, we blanch the vegetables that are in here and really increase the temperature. Okay, so I've cranked up the heat to medium high, and now we're going to add our sesame seed oil. You can use any brand you want. Basically, you're going to use about a teaspoon. That's going to give that flavor that you always get in Chinese food. And you'll smell it too. Now I'm going to let this cook down a little bit more to see how this is still firm, but we like our vegetables a little bit cooked more than this. You may not. You may like them nice and crispy, so go ahead and proceed with the next step if this is the way you like it. But basically the cabbage is starting to blanch. It's not quite there for us. I like it a little tenderer, and the peppers a little softer. Okay, so now I've cooked them down to the point where I want the vegetables on this end. And now we're going to add in the shrimp. Now this is raw, uncooked shrimp. So keep in mind that if you have cooked shrimp already, it's going to be a little more difficult to, the cooking time. You would just throw them in with the mushrooms and the broccoli right away. But in this case, they're raw, so they're going to have to cook a little bit. And they'll cook fairly rapidly, so you ain't got much time between when you put these in and when you throw the broccoli in. So you give it about a minute or two. This is a jumbo-sized shrimp, and they're raw. Now this is the point where you add your cornstarch and water in to thicken the broth. And it will change color a little bit. Just mix that up. You see the shrimp is cooking. And before we do anything else, we need to test the broth. So we'll leave a little space here with the broth and see what it tastes like. Now I'm thinking we need a little more brown sugar in this. So just add a little bit more. About a quarter cup. And we'll mix that up. See how it's already thickening up? That makes it stick to your vegetables, to all your food, cornstarch. And now, yeah, that's perfect. And now we'll go ahead and add our broccoli and our mushrooms. And we're going to mix that up too, so we coat them with all this stuff. It's all about flavor, folks, and cooking the vegetables at the right time. If you don't do that, your food will come out mushy, and the parts you want to be crisp and solid and vibrant will end up being yucky. So we're going to go ahead and cover that real quick, and I'll do a taste test on the spatula, my finger. Now I've determined from testing I want a little more teriyaki flavor, so I'm going to add a little more sauce. And you can do it by taste. There's no precise recipe for this. It's whatever you and your family likes. Look at that. Oh, well, this is going to be good. You notice how that cornstarch makes the sauce stick on everything now. And that's what you want, basically, because that's the flavor that goes into all this. It doesn't overpower it, but it sure the heck does give you the flavor you're looking for. So I'm going to test this again. Yeah, that's really good. However, in our case, we need more heat. So I'm going to put a little more of this in there, Cajun seasoning, because we just love this stuff. We want a little more heat. And that's it, folks. It's going off the heat. Let's put this over here. Taking it off the heat. And now it's time to serve up the food. So now it's time to serve up the food. You see I have a plate of rice here, and I put an indentation in the bottom. And let's go ahead and grab some of this right here. Start fixing it up. Now this is obviously not for me because I'm not a teenager, but this is good stuff here. A few more shrimp. And some more meat. And there you go.